Kyrie Andrew Irving, 8-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA member, 1-time champion, one of the most skillful players we have ever seen in the NBA, and owner of one of the most clutchest and best shots in NBA Finals history. But as great as Kyrie Irving has been in his NBA career so far in 12 seasons, one thing that will always keep him down when it comes to public opinions is his actions off the court. And again, in 12 seasons, he has been through many, and I mean many, controversies in his career. After requesting a trade from the Brooklyn Nets and getting said trade going to the Dallas Mavericks today as I'm recording this video, as the Nets were the 4th seed in the East, currently completing one of the best one-season turnarounds in NBA history after the firing of then coach Steve Nash, and lastly leaving his partner in crime who he came there with in Kevin Durant 5 years ago, the public opinion of Kyrie Irving has once again fell lower and only confirms people's thoughts about him being a team wrecker, placing his own interest over others. So with that being said, in this video, I want to go down memory lane and go through every single Kyrie Irving controversy since his time in the NBA and try to make sense or even explain why he even go through all this public backlash to have his way in his own drama series in his life. So if that sounds good, then sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy, because this will definitely be a long one. And be sure to like the video for more videos like these and subscribe to keep up with every new upload. But with all that out of the way, you already know who it is. Roll it!
3, 2, 1.
Weights in the weight room, so he stitched up in the left hand.
Well, from what I understand, this meeting, this is not, we're all finding out about this today, but the Cavs have known about this for more than a week. And so this is something that they've been working through. LeBron has known about it for more than a week. And one thing you have to realize about Kyrie Irving, he signed this contract that he is on back in 2014, before LeBron came back to Cleveland. When he signed this deal, guys, he was presented with the scenario, hey, we're going to build around you. We're going to build like another Phoenix Suns here. David Griffin had just been named the GM. David Blatt had just been named the coach. They sat and they met and they said, you're going to be our guy. You're going to be our Steve Nash. And LeBron arrived 2 weeks later. And over the course of the last couple of years, Kyrie has talked about this, guys, as recently as a month ago, has talked about the balance that he's had to make between wanting to be selfish, wanting to be the centerpiece star, and wanting to play alongside a transcendent player and win championships. And so this is something he's gone back and forth on. And in the wake of David Griffin, who he was very close with leaving the organization, he apparently has decided that he doesn't want to go the LeBron route anymore.
Well, the line, and you and Woj co-authored this story on ESPN.com, the line that made me jump out of my chair was, third to last paragraph, that Irving considered requesting a trade following the Cavs championship last season, but decided against it. So this has been festering for a while, but he said all the right things last year about sacrificing for the team. So was he just putting on a happy face when really all along he's just been ready to get out of there as soon as possible?
On June 21st, 2017, 2 seasons after the infamous 3-1 series comeback over the Golden State Warriors, the Cleveland Cavaliers were told by Kyrie Irving that he was requesting a trade, and it was by the surprise of everyone who was an NBA fan. This is the same person who just won his first championship at the age of 23 and is playing with one of, if not the best players in NBA history, and LeBron James as a running mate for who was supposed to be his running mate for years to come to keep on contending for more championships. But for some reason, Kyrie Irving wanted out. What could have caused this? Well, according to Brian Windhorst, it was due to an internal battle of wanting to be the guy of his own team in Cleveland or just in the NBA in general. According to Brian Windhorst in his infamous article on this story that he broke, he was quoted to say, the request came last week and was made to Cavaliers owner Dan Gilbert. Irving said he wanted to play in a situation where he could be more of a focal point and that he no longer wanted to play alongside LeBron James, sources said, which is crazy to think about and can't be argued that Kyrie Irving just wanted to do everything on his own without someone else imposing on that by being better than him. And when you're giving a new deal with that promise by Dan Gilbert in the 2014 offseason, and then the next thing you know, LeBron James comes in and takes over operations, I can somewhat understand where he's coming from by the fact that it ruined his original plans. But I think Brian Windhorst says it better than anybody else in this interview clip I showed you earlier.
when the Cavs won the championship 2 years ago or a year ago, he came back to the locker room. You know what he did? He FaceTimed Kobe from the winning locker room. So he sees himself in the mold of Kobe. And whether or not, this isn't exactly like Kobe's Shaq, but Michael, this was something that I was thinking could be a possibility down the line with Kyrie and LeBron. I was certainly keeping my eye on it. But Kyrie gave an interview, 2 interviews really. One the night that the Cavs won the Eastern Conference title, and then another one right before the finals where he talked about this conflict that he's had in between them. And he said, I have the quotes in my story that I ran today. He said, I'd rather know that I'm competing for a championship with LeBron than be up at 3 a.m. wondering what the direction of my franchise is going to be. And maybe that's something he told himself to get through it.
Right.
And maybe he's just changed his mind on that. And we'll say this, he hasn't been traded yet. He could change his mind.
Now,
Wait, Kyrie could change his mind?
He hasn't been traded yet. I'm pretty sure this is...
Just like all NBA players, everyone before they became an NBA player molds their game either to their own strengths or by example of another NBA legend. And for Kyrie Irving, he molded himself in the preset of a Kobe Bryant. But he took the alpha dog mentality that almost ruined his career at one point, splitting up the Kobe and Shaq era until he was given new co-stars later in Pau Gasol and others. But now for Kyrie, he wants to do the same role, to leave everything to himself, and with LeBron James presumably going to take more credit for the success that he could have potentially had himself, and now he just wanted to get out of there. But of course, again, like I said, he was forced to stay due to the contract that he signed 2 weeks before LeBron touched down in Cleveland. Now, as someone who's played sports all my life, the alpha dog mentality can be a blessing and a curse at the same time, especially if you can back it up with some skill. But with Kyrie Irving, it was safe to say that he was damn near delusional to not see the writing on the wall for his career if he decided to stay in Cleveland. We can all agree that he is not as good as LeBron, and due to that, he can't carry a team to the promised land off his own back. And due to him being in Cleveland, no one is going to go there unless traded there or given an obscene amount of money to be there in the first place. The season before LeBron James came to the team, the Cavaliers went 33-49, and with no future in sight unless they drafted correctly, which they haven't been able to do, with Anthony Bennett being drafted that same year and Dion Waiters and Tyler Zeller being drafted the year before. In their defense, though, they did get Andrew Wiggins the year LeBron did drop in, but seeing how his career is now, that wouldn't even have been enough itself. In my opinion, LeBron James is the best thing to ever happen to Kyrie Irving in his entire career, because LeBron did not have to come back to Cleveland to give his hometown a championship off his own hands. But Kyrie Irving decided to ruin that after the fact for the prospect of winning it by his own volition rather than with a team effort. Kyrie maybe be a top player in the league in this decade in his position, but overall, him by himself will give him as much progress as someone like a Devin Booker today. Tons of bad luck, gathering draft picks to help around him, and an all-in move to get an old star like, in this case, Chris Paul, to make it to the finals once and regress since then. That would be Kyrie Irving's career in the NBA if he was in Cleveland all by himself. But with this attitude he was given by the media, it made him look similar to a Carmelo Anthony of the past. Because as long as he was the leader, he could not care how things went. But again, that was how the media portrayed it. He would even go as far as to threaten an injury to stay out all year to get his way, as that year he was getting traded, or at least trying to get traded, was the year before his contract was due to end. And considering how his actions are nowadays, he was fully serious about it. But let's see how Kyrie decides to defend himself on national television on this ESPN interview.
So why was it time to make the move?
Well, it was interesting 6 years, and you think about how the journey transcended my career from starting the first 3 years. That was a picture in itself, and then the last 3 years. And you think about those finite moments that have defined you as a player and as a man. You're very appreciative of it. Getting the chance to play with some unbelievable teammates, had the chance to be with some unbelievable coaches as well. Got a chance to develop and evolve as a man, and I just felt it was best for my intentions to leave. So.
Let's break this down and let's get specific for a couple of things. I appreciate you being on the show. You know me. I'm going to ask now. What happened, man? Because it just seemed like, 1 minute you're in the championship, you're in the finals, you're hugging LeBron, you're happy to be in Cleveland, you're looking forward to coming back to compete for another championship, and then the next minute you want out. What happened?
I was just very patient in my approach. Understanding what the magnitude of the moment was. I wasn't going to allow anything else to get in the way of our team's success. So I was just very diligent, very professional in terms of this whole entire process. And the request came at a time where I felt it deemed right for me. As a 25-year-old evolving man, coming in to perfect my craft every single day, I just wanted to be in an environment where I felt like I could be taught every single day and have that demand from my coaching staff and have the demand from a franchise that would propel me to exceeding my potential or seeing out where.
So once again, he gave us his answer. It was all about leading a team and having that responsibility on his own hands and no one else's. After researching this video, as I wanted to get as much evidence as possible, I can see why people truly came to not like Kyrie as an athlete, because his actions just doesn't make sense towards what you think every athlete would want: a successful championship-filled career and reaching the heights of Jordan, Bill Russell, Kareem, or even a Kobe Bryant, his own idol. And that opportunity absolutely fell into his lap when LeBron James decided to come back to Cleveland and win a championship with them. But I guess his 25-year-old brain wasn't fully developed yet to see that he could have just simply been the Pippen to Jordan's LeBron, and it was going to be the ticket for eternal success in the NBA. Instead, he decided to choose his own path, and with that, he was traded before the season started to the Boston Celtics, to the disappointment of LeBron James. But as we all know, Kyrie would come to regret this decision, as he was quoted to say later, "If I was in the same maturity line and understanding of who I am now and look back, we definitely would have won more championships, because there would have been a better man-to-man understanding about what I was going through," said Irving. "I don't know how to share my emotions," Irving said. "I don't know how to do that, so instead of sharing, I isolated myself." So with that ends the first controversy of Kyrie Irving's long career so far. And it's a heavy hitter, risking his own reputation for individual success over something very selfish, rather than becoming a two-man tandem with one of the best players we have ever seen in NBA history after already winning one. But even as he left Cleveland, people just believed he would simply just get his wish and still be as successful as he was on the Cavaliers, on the Celtics. Still dislike my Cleveland Cavaliers fan alike, but can at least compete with the team who they beat in the conference finals in the Boston Celtics. But as we all know, this would not be the end of his antics in the NBA.
What went through your mind when you just heard Kyrie?
That Kyrie's gone. That Kyrie Irving will not be in Boston next year. That's the first thing that jumped to my mind. I mean, that's not breaking news. We all anticipate that the likelihood is that he'll leave. There's no guarantee, but we anticipate that that's what's going to be the case. But in terms of answering the question directly as to what went through my mind when I watched them get outscored 36-13 in the second quarter, when I watched them get blown out of Canada, okay, what was going through my mind was, oh, Kyrie's not staying here. And especially when I heard the post-game comments, because when you hear Marcus Smart talking about we're not together, when you hear Brad Stevens talking about we're taking shortcuts, and then when you couple that with Kyrie Irving being on the record, we're going to be all right because I'm here. When you take into account the fact that he departed from Cleveland because he wanted to be the face of a franchise, he wanted someplace to be his own squad. Well, that's not what's transpiring here, especially when Danny Ainge just talked about, I'm, going after Anthony Davis. Those reports have been out there. You're willing to trade some of those important parts to Jason Tatum's, the Jaylen Browns of the world, and others. When you take all of those things into account, and then you hear about Danny Ainge sitting next to Kyrie Irving in the locker room, talking to him and what have you, trying to assuage concerns to some degree. In the end, what it comes down to is Kyrie Irving. When you talk about him being his team, it's not the Boston Celtics. It's Danny Ainge's team. It's Brad Stevens' team. Their willingness to insert Gordon Hayward into the mix prematurely, which compromised a lot of what they wanted to do offensively, not defensively. Even though to some degree they fall off defensively, they're still a top 10 defensive team. 8th against three-pointers, 8th overall defensively. Bottom line is I watched that last night, and I said to myself, this ain't the place for Kyrie Irving. Come July 1, he's gone.
I thought,
after a huge loss in the regular season to the Toronto Raptors, Stephen A. Smith on First Take made a prediction about Kyrie Irving leaving the Boston Celtics that year, and his analysis on it was absolutely spot on, as the Celtics that year were a mess when it came to personnel and lacking true leadership in the locker room. So many people on the team wanted to cook on offense, locker room problems, and no overall chemistry on the team, which showed on the court despite their 49-33 record, which was a decline from the record in Kyrie's first season, especially since they had the best defense that year. But with a controversy comes here is where he actually does leave Boston after his infamous announcement in that same season where he promised to stay there with this young group of a second-year Jason Tatum, a young Jaylen Brown, and other great pieces all around.
But there will be more spaces up there. Kyrie, how important is it to see number 11 up there one day?
It's quite important, and I appreciate that, Scout. I joined in, but I shared it with some of my teammates as well as the organization and everyone else in Boston. If you guys will have me back, I plan on re-signing here next year.
Boom!
So.
And with that verbal agreement signed in non-official ink, people expected him to be basically a Celtic for life. But as we all know, after his loss to the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round of the 2019 playoffs, he then signs with KD to the Brooklyn Nets in that summer, breaking that promise and once again creating a hate mob and only confirming people's hate and dislike for him. But in this case, I can at least defend Kyrie, but only barely. There are two separate pieces of evidence that can be used towards why he decided to leave Boston in the first place, and they both paint him in different lights.
We kind of elaborate on the process of, like, for you obviously making that commitment in October, kind of saying you'd like to go back to Boston. Obviously things changed, and just kind of what changed for you over that time?
Well, I think around that time, it felt incredible in terms of the energy that we were building, especially for the future in Boston. It was something that I couldn't really explain at the time because, you know, personally, I don't think I was acknowledging the things that were surrounding my life as well, and how to lead this group of guys that I've been traded to, that I wasn't drafted by Boston. I had no type of affiliation with Boston before I left Cleveland. There wasn't any anything that happened. Boston was a surprise team with Wick and Danny that took the chance on trading for me. And when they did, and the way our first season happened, and then also the way the end of the season happened, and having so much youth and so much exuberance and goals set personally, I think that some of the actual knowledge that needed to be had in terms of being a championship team takes more than just 2 years. It takes more than just an environment that you feel just comfortable in. Hey, you know, I think I want to re-sign here if you guys have me. Boston crowd was immense. It was crazy. They loved me in Boston. I loved the Boston fans. And then 2 weeks later, things just got really rocky for me in terms of when I left for, I believe you know, after the Phoenix game, I went to my grandfather's memorial, and he passed on October 23rd, and after he passed, basketball was the last thing on my mind. So a lot of basketball and the joy I had from it was sucked away from me, and there was a facial expression that I carried around with me throughout the year. Didn't allow anyone to get close to me in that instance, and it really bothered me, and I didn't take you know, the necessary steps to get counseling or get therapy or anything to deal with someone that close to me dying. I've never dealt with anything like that. So for me, I responded in ways that are uncharacteristic. And like I said, I had to acknowledge that fact. And I had to acknowledge that fact to the organization first, because that was our internal bond and trust that we had. I talked to Danny. I wanted to re-sign. So throughout the year, it started becoming more and more clear that my relationships within my home life have way higher precedent than the organization or anyone. And I barely got a chance to talk to my grandfather before he passed from playing basketball. So you tell me if you would want to go to work every single day knowing that you just lost somebody close to you, doing a job every single day that everyone from the outside or anyone internally is protecting you for. Like, hey, just keep being a basketball player. So throughout that year, it just became rocky, and a lot of the battles that I thought I could battle through in the team environment, I just wasn't ready for. And I failed those guys in a sense that I didn't give them everything that I could have during that season, especially with the amount of pieces that we had. So my relationships with them personally were great, but in terms of me being a leader in that environment and bringing everyone together, I failed. So, you know, for me, it's just a huge learning experience just to slow down and acknowledge that I'm human in all this, and then also take my steps going forward of reaching out to Danny and talking to those guys in Wick and reaching out to them and letting them know, hey, look, basketball can end tomorrow, I care about you guys as a human being. I know this is a competitive environment, but let's move past this.
Now, I already know there will be two sides of people in this debate, because to some people, they see this as another I need to do environment explanation that he gave for leaving Cleveland, and others will understand to an extent to why he just wanted to leave again. But I can understand how the death of a loved one can send you into a spiral a little bit, but even then, moving teams that you could possibly contend with for what was basically explained as a fresh start again from all of it just seems kind of interesting, to say the least. But at least we can all imagine the experience still stays with you throughout your entire life. But you think the plan would be to heal and get right for the next season and spin the block as you had one of the best young teams in the NBA. Again, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown with other quality pieces that can only be attained by one of the better GMs in the NBA in Danny Ainge. But the last thing we can do is fully understand what a person does, as we are not them, and that definitely goes for Kyrie Irving, who just made 2 questionable career moves for the sake of a fresh start. Now, in a live stream, he goes into a lot more detail of his experiences in Boston and why he left, and definitely opens up a whole lot more in detail, again, that the NBA or the media will not tell you. For example, his mentality due to his knee surgery, going through grief during an NBA season, the recovery process of coming off that same injury, what it was like being the top guy in Boston, and all the context of why he decided to go to Boston in the first place. This all comes from this one video here, where he totally goes candid about the whole situation and unfiltered, and I really suggest you give it a watch as he goes into full details about everything. I'd show you some of the things he said here, but I think you'll receive it a whole lot better if you just listen to the 30-minute segment yourself. But again, when it comes to his departure from Boston, I can understand both sides fully. On one side, Boston traded you to be a rental and gave up many assets that could have been used for a championship run or to rebuild by trading them for later assets, just for you to play 2 disappointing seasons outside of the conference final run led by everybody else, and again, for you to leave for Brooklyn. And on the other side, you have Kyrie Irving, who was truly going through it as a human being and just wanted a true fresh start to get away from it all and to play with his IRL friends in DeAndre Jordan and Kevin Durant. If you want my opinion, I'm more on the first side, as Kyrie Irving could have healed during the offseason and come back ready for the next season, and he would have been in a way better situation in Boston than he would have been in Brooklyn. But again, we're not Kyrie. We can't make decisions for him, and we're just going to have to basically deal with it and complain about it. But instead, well, we'll just have to see how his next journey in Brooklyn goes. And as we all know, it only gets much, much worse.
Brooklyn Nets guard Kyrie Irving has been fined $50,000 for violating the league's health and safety protocols. The violation occurred when he attended a private indoor party last weekend. Irving will forfeit salary for any games he misses due to his 5-day quarantine period, which will allow him to return to team activities tomorrow if he continues to test negative. He is expected to play against the Magic. So, guys, we should potentially see the big 3 there in Brooklyn for the first time tomorrow. What do you expect, Stephen A?
I don't know what to expect, to be honest with you. I mean, first of all, it's not what we see now this weekend. It's what we're going to see in the weeks to come. James Harden has been out of shape, so he's got to get himself in shape. And Kyrie Irving has been out for whatever reason, and now he's expected to come back. So James Harden's got to get his body together. Kyrie Irving has to get his mind together. Once that happens, then you see the big three on the court, and then you judge them as the big 3. Right now, they're just individuals that are playing together. They're not necessarily a team. The only person that's been a consistent model of a teammate has been Kevin Durant at this particular moment in time. I believe in Harden personally. I know he's been taking a lot of hits and what have you, but he was just trying to get himself out of there, and we understand all of that. He doesn't engage in load management. He gives it to you. In the case of Kyrie Irving, those 5 games, Kyrie Irving in the 72-game season this year, guys, is getting paid $464,000 per game. So him being out or being penalized for these 5 games without pay is going to cost him in excess of $2.3 million. I hope it was worth it for him.
Oh man, this one's going to be a good one. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic affected people's day-to-day activities, and in the subject of this video, the sports world entirely. The NBA ran the bubble to try to bring some normalcy back to basketball, but as more and more development happened with the virus, it became up to the individual states to set up their own guidelines on how they went about letting their citizens go about their day-to-day life. Some states let it all open, some states were really strict, and in the state of New York, where the Brooklyn Nets reside, they proclaimed that the team had to be vaccinated or could not not play in the NBA, as the NBA rules coincided with the state's rules. And Kyrie Irving decided not to do that, which is where another controversy involving Kyrie Irving comes, as he became a main component of an anti-vax rhetoric that was blasted all over the media. But just like the last section, there were two thoughts to this debate, as Kyrie Irving's stance was simply that he had the option of choice and he decided not to, and hoped everyone else would exercise their freedom of choice as human beings. And I'm not here to get fully into that, as this is a basketball channel, but fans all over saw his stance as dumb, as he was one of the best players on the Brooklyn Nets and was jeopardizing his team's season over the vaccine, which again turned people absolutely off from him. And again, this was the same season where they was trying to run it back with the big three of James Harden, himself, and KD, which was going to be one of, if not the best trio of all time. Because the first time around it was ruined by injury, and now the second time around it was ruined by Kyrie's refusal of the vaccine and another KD injury. And due to that, his refusal to take the vaccine, he was locked out of team activities, and up until the 36th game of the season versus the Indiana Pacers, he was allowed to play in away games with the team. And then finally in game 75 was allowed to play in home games, as he was able to change legislation in the state due to his stance. Now again, this really does go down to what you yourself believe in would have been the right thing to do for the success of your team or career. But Kyrie outright said in that situation, it was bigger than basketball, so he was really willing to discard his entire career over it. Again, it pissed off a lot of people that he was willing to take all these fines and the like over his beliefs and reluctance to take the vaccine, but he stood on it until the very end, ruining his chance at a ring that year, as they traded away Harden to Philly for a new interesting character in Ben Simmons, and getting swept in the first round to the eventual finals team in the East, the Boston Celtics, his old team. But with the situation over and done with, you can truly see what Kyrie Irving is, a man who is immovable in his stances in life and will not falter to change it. To some, a hero, to some, a villain, to some, an absolute drama queen. But this situation in Brooklyn will only compound more as other controversies happen in his time in the Big Apple.
Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. We will get to the World Series no-hitter in a moment, but we begin today with developing news about Kyrie Irving. Last night, the Nets and Irving released a statement with the Anti-Defamation League in which they agreed to donate $500,000 each towards, quote, causes and organizations that work to eradicate hate and intolerance in our communities, unquote. In the statement, Irving said he took responsibility for what was seen as his endorsement of an anti-Semitic book and movie, but he did not apologize, nor did he during a brief media session today. Also today, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver issued a statement calling Irving's original social media post, quote, a reckless decision, unquote, and added that he was, quote, disappointed Kyrie has not offered an unqualified apology and more specifically denounced the vile and harmful content contained in the film he chose to publicize, unquote. Silver further said he would meet with Irving in the next week.
We go from one sensitive issue to another, and be quite honest with y'all, I know absolutely little about the situation, and I want it to stay that way, as when I do research on something, I go absolutely in. And the rabbit hole I'd go down to find information on this film he promoted will only give me a headache. But let's start from the beginning. On October 27, 2022, Kyrie Irving posted on his Twitter and on his Instagram an Amazon film called Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America, as an endorsement for his messages in the film, because as we all know, Kyrie Irving is definitely a religious individual and very deep into his identity. However, where he went wrong and didn't think about is the potential of the messages that he had in the film that would go after a certain group of people. As the film he promoted was sending a message that other religious groups, which included the Jewish faith, covered up the true identity of biblical figures. Due to this, Kyrie Irving was labeled as an anti-Semitic person for spreading said movie to his millions of followers, and what was even worse, at least the public perception, was the fact that he doubled down on the promotion and did not apologize initially.
Hindsight, are you sorry for the hurt that your posts caused people?
I take my responsibility for posting that. Some things that were questionable in there, untrue. Like I said, and the first time you guys asked me when I was sitting on that stage, I don't believe everything that everybody posts. It's a documentary, so I'm taking my responsibility.
It seems like Adam Silver wanted to hear the word I apologize, or in your mind you said I didn't mean to cause any harm. Were you apologizing or did you not apologize?
I didn't mean to cause any harm. I'm not the one that made the documentary.
What are the specific things in the documentary that you don't believe are true and that you don't believe represent your wrongs?
I think some of the criticism of the Jewish faith in the community, for sure. Some points made in there that were unfortunate.
Kyrie, are you surprised that you did hurt people?
Surprised that I did hurt people?
Are you surprised that reaction and some of the things that you did hurt people?
Yeah, I think I can ask a better question. It's just, where were you when I was a kid, figuring out that 300 million of my ancestors are buried in America? Where were you guys asking those same questions when I was a kid learning about the traumatic events of my familial history and what I'm proud to come from and why I'm proud to stand here and why when I repeat myself that I'm not going to stand down, it has nothing to do with dismissing any other race or group of people. I'm just proud of my heritage and what we've been through. And the fact that this has pinned me against the Jewish community. And I'm here answering questions of whether or not I'm sorry or not on something I didn't create. And it was something I shared. And I'm telling everybody I'm taking responsibility. Then that's where I sit.
Now again, I'm not going to get into the whole situation when it comes to the ins and outs because we'd be here all day and would turn this video into something else entirely. But again, as the controversy goes, Kyrie Irving promoted something to the public that wasn't deemed as correct to the majority and received backlash. Now, I'm a very belligerent person by fault, but even I can tell you I know when to stand down just to save face and not take unnecessary heat. But for someone like Kyrie, he was willing to go about it and absolutely double down in this interview I showed you earlier. And as he said in said interview, he did not create it. And due to that, we see one of the weirdest punishments given to a player in NBA history, as Kyrie Irving was forced to apologize for sharing the movie and condemn the movie, give $500,000 to anti-hate organizations, go through sensitivity and anti-Semitic training, meet with literal Jewish leaders about the issue, and finally meet with the owner of the Nets about his actions. Again, one of the weirdest things I've seen a player do as punishment, but even the NBA was catching heat for all this as it was deemed a bit much and also a way to try to save face for themselves, and honestly, I kind of agree with that. But due to this action, he probably made many enemies in the Jewish community, lost sponsors and his shoe deal with Nike, and faced a 5-game suspension. I'm sorry that I cannot go fully into it like I usually do, but considering the subject matter, I hope you understand why. Even I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But anyways, with that situation over and done with, no one really brought it back up after he went back to playing after the suspension was done, and the Nets firing of Steve Nash right before the suspension. And the Nets are now looking better than ever. Coach Jacques Vaughn absolutely turned this team into a top defensive team. They went from the near bottom of the East into contending with the top seeds in the East, and Kyrie Irving became the king of the fourth quarter, become the leading scorer in the fourth quarter with his many explosions in the final quarter scoring wise. But even with their public position of being able to compete for another championship with KD, a new situation, the weirdest of them all, was now hovering over the horizon.
What do you think of this trade request?
Idiotic. Let's get that out the way. Here's a guy in Kyrie Irving that for the last 3 years, who's gotten most of his money, but missed more than 50% of his games, enters the last year after this offseason. Obviously, the situation that he got himself into earlier this year was unfortunate, but he resurrected himself from that. Was playing spectacular basketball, leading vote getter amongst guards for the All-Star game, playing outstanding basketball and reminding everybody what an absolute flat-out superstar basketball player he is. No one questioned that. All we ever questioned was, can the man go the rest of the season without being any kind of distraction if he's going to have a chance to get his money? And lo and behold, he pulls this. And why? Because the Brooklyn Nets had the temerity, the unmitigated goal, to say, play the season. We'll see. Because we haven't had you for a full season without any drama. And here he is again. For a guy that's looking for a long-term deal from another team, there is no question about what you're getting when Kyrie Irving is on the basketball court. The only question mark regarding him is his commitment to not being a distraction and to going out there and performing. And the fact that he's made headlines with this, all it did was serve to remind everybody out there he's spectacular. We'd love to have him in our uniform so long as we don't have to make a long-term investment in him because he cannot be trusted. He just reminded the basketball world.
And now the most confusing arc in this entire video. Kyrie Irving, after 4 long, agonizing, drama-filled seasons as a Brooklyn Net, is now asking for a trade away from the Nets, the team that he chose as a destination away from his time in Boston, and being able to play with his longtime friend in Kevin Durant and have his way. BK, let me stop. But now he wants to end that. Why? Well, it's because the Brooklyn Nets do not want to give him a full max contract extension for his troubles. And let's be real here, who the fuck can blame them? Let's go over some of the controversies in Brooklyn caused by Kyrie and KD since his time there. Forcing the Nets to get rid of Kenny Atkinson, hiring Steve Nash, who only served as a detriment proven by the fact that he got fired, the COVID fiasco that ran James Harden out of Brooklyn and now forces them to deal with Ben Simmons, and of course the anti-Semitism smear campaign brought onto himself. So you've now proven that over a 4-year span that you are more of a liability to a franchise that your play cannot justify. You are now not worth the trouble you have brought to the team due to your actions, so they are completely in the right to not give you a max contract extension that you want. So in retaliation, he asked for a trade to a team who will want to deal with him. But the crazy thing is, are there even any teams who want to go out there and even take that risk? You may be taking one of the best guard talents of the 2010s, but what you also get is a loose cannon who won't think of his actions before he goes through with it, that can only hurt himself financially or reputation-wise, or his team's success in many ways than one, as we've gone through in this video. Whether it be him not playing or himself being a real distraction in the locker room, messing up chemistry, Kyrie Irving is now considered public enemy number 1 to a lot of people in the NBA due to all of his antics, and now even his own team, who has dealt with him all until this point, is now telling him he cannot be trusted, which should be a true wake-up call for himself, as he is now into his 30s and only has so much time left before basketball isn't a path for him anymore, or he truly will be blackballed in the NBA, as no one would even want to risk his services. But there are still some teams out there that can think they can use him and willing to pay him what he thinks he's worth. So as this video comes out, whether before or after he gets traded, which in this case, as I'm writing this, he actually did get traded to the Dallas Mavericks, the real question is, will he keep being unapologetically himself and risk his own team's success and himself mainly? Or will he just chill out until he retires? He may still be one of the best guards in the NBA. He is even being represented as a starter in this year's All-Star game, which is kind of funny because I wonder how that's going to work out now. But sooner or later, his shit won't be tolerated by anyone. But the crazy thing is, he won't care because he's Kyrie Irving, and like he said, he doesn't need basketball. But it's always impossible to try to understand the inner mechanisms of the mind of Kyrie Irving. But at the time of this video, again, he actually got his wish as he starts a potential new chapter in Dallas with Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. Will he be able to coexist in Dallas? Will he sign a new deal after the season is over? Will he stay out of trouble through his own volition? And will he be competing for a championship? Honestly, who knows, man? He is just that polarizing of a sports figure. So once again, let's do a quick review of the controversies of Kyrie Irving. He leaves LeBron James to fend for himself what can only be described as for selfish reasons, leaves the Celtics for a fresh start after a dark period in his life, runs the Nets into the ground due to his conduct on 2 occasions, and when he doesn't get his way, proceeds to ask for a trade due to his own actions, which caused for him to not get the extension that he wants. We can all agree that every single mishap that has been documented in this video was 100% due to his own volition and has no one but to blame but himself in these circumstances. However, due to his talent level, he will continuously be forgiven, as there are teams who will still gladly take him on potentially with his controversies for a potential top-tier basketball player. So for whoever gets him, and again, in this case, the Dallas Mavericks, all I can say is, especially to you, Mark Cuban, good luck. But with that being said, what are y'all opinions on Kyrie Irving and all the subjects talked about today in this video? I never would have imagined by the end of this I'd start to dislike Kyrie, but man, it's kind of hard to support him when he just goes around doing all this stuff to himself and is about risking his multi-million-dollar career like it's nothing. So leave your thoughts below, because you already know I'm ready to read every single one of them. But as always, I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something new, as my vision for this channel is to inform and, of course, entertain. Check out my social medias for the instant life of Alvini and other channel news. Check out my Twitch and my second channel where I post my streams. And lastly, if you want to talk to your boy, there is always my Discord. Links are in the description. But with all that out of the way, this is your boy, Alvini Linguini, Same piece. But again, I'm so ready to see how this turns out in Dallas, bro. This cannot end well.